speed didn't kill these motorcycles. Politics did. We live in a world of rules. Speed limits, emission standards, safety regulations. Usually, engineers work around these rules. They find loopholes. They adapt. But sometimes, a motorcycle comes along that is so dangerous, so loud, or so incredibly fast, that the government doesn't just regulate it, they hunt it down. From the two-stroke smoke machines that poisoned the air of the 1970s, to the turbocharged monsters that insurance companies refused to cover, history is full of machines that were simply too wild for the public road. Some were banned because they were dangerous. Others were banned because they were too good. Today, we are opening the police evidence locker. These are the 7 motorcycle engines that were banned, outlawed, and erased by the law. In the early 1980s, the motorcycle industry lost its mind. They entered what we now call the turbo arms race. It started with a simple physics problem. Engines back then were heavy. To go faster, you needed a bigger engine, but a bigger engine made the bike heavier, which made it slower in the corners. It was a losing battle. Japanese engineers thought they found the magic bullet, turbocharging. They took medium-sized engine 650s and 750s and forced compressed air into them until they produced the power of a liter bike. On paper, it was genius. On the road, it was a disaster. The problem was turbo lag. On these early 80s bikes, you would twist the throttle, and for 2 seconds, nothing would happen. Then, suddenly, the turbo would spool up, and the bike would deliver a massive explosion of horsepower all at once. Imagine leaning into a corner on a wet road. You gently roll on the throttle. Nothing happens. Then boom, an extra 40 horsepower hits the rear wheel instantly. The result was high sides, crashes, and chaos. But the government didn't ban the technology explicitly. The insurance industry did it for them. In the United States, insurance premiums for turbo bikes skyrocketed so high that they became effectively illegal to own for the average rider. By the mid-80s, the turbo era was dead, killed by the actuaries who realized these machines were writing checks the chassis couldn't cash. If the turbo bikes were killed by danger, the two-stroke legends were killed by the air they breathed. To a purist, there is no sound better than a two-stroke engine hitting the power band. It's a chainsaw buzz that turns into a scream. Bikes like the Yamaha RD350 and the RZ500 were capable of embarrassing supercars. They were light, simple, and ferociously fast, but they had a dirty secret. A four-stroke engine like the one in your car keeps the oil and the fuel separate. A two-stroke mixes them together. This means that every time a two-stroke engine fires, it is literally burning, lubricating oil and spitting it out of the tailpipe. By the late 1970s and early 80s, the Environmental Protection Agency in the US and regulators in Europe looked at the data. A single two-stroke motorcycle could emit as much pollution as a dozen cars. The ban didn't happen overnight. It was a strangulation. First, they tightened hydrocarbon limits in California, then nationwide. Yamaha tried to save the two-stroke with the RZ350, installing catalytic converters and complicated plumbing to clean up the smoke. But it was over. By 1985, the street-legal two-stroke performance bike was effectively outlawed in the US. They became truck-only weapons, illegal to register for the road. The government decided that clean air was more important than the smell of burning castor oil. This is the only time in history that motorcycle manufacturers banned themselves to stop the government from stepping in. The year was 1999. Suzuki released the Hayabusa, named after the peregrine falconer bird that eats blackbirds. It was designed to destroy the Honda CBR 1100XX Super Blackbird, and it did. The Hayabusa hit 194 miles per hour straight out of the box. Politicians in Europe were horrified. The argument was simple. Why does a civilian need a vehicle that can travel 3 times the speed limit? Rumors began to circulate in the European Parliament. They were drafting legislation to ban all motorcycles with over 100 horsepower. This would have destroyed the motorcycle industry. Ducati, Suzuki, Honda, Kawasaki, they would have lost their flagship models overnight. So, the manufacturers held a secret meeting. They looked at the politicians, looked at their bikes, and blinked. They signed the gentleman's agreement. They agreed to electronically limit every single motorcycle to 186 miles per hour, 300 kilometers per hour. For 2 decades, no matter how much power a bike had, the computer would cut the fuel at 186 miles per hour. They neutered their own machines to save them from a total government ban. It remains one of the most successful preemptive strikes in corporate history. We usually talk about 2 wheels here, but we have to mention the missing link, the 3-wheeler. In the 1970s and 80s, the Honda ATC all-terrain cycle was the king of off-road. It had huge balloon tires and a solid rear axle. It was cheap, it was fun, and it was everywhere. It was also mechanically flawed in a way that defied physics. With 1 wheel in the front and 2 in the back, the center of gravity was deceptively high. If you turned sharply and hit a bump, the trike didn't slide, it flipped. And because riders put their feet down to catch themselves, the rear wheels would run over their legs. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, in the United States launched an investigation. The statistics were horrifying. Thousands of injuries, many of them children. In 1988, the US government practically forced the manufacturers into a consent decree. They agreed to stop selling 3-wheelers immediately. They bought back unsold inventory and destroyed it. It is one of the only times the government has effectively wiped an entire category of vehicle off the face of the earth. Today, you can't buy a new 3-wheeler ATC. They are extinct by law. Bans don't always look like police raids. Sometimes they look like a spreadsheet. For 20 years, the 600cc supersport class was the heart of the sport bike world. The Yamaha R6, the Honda CB R600RR, the Suzuki GSXR 600. These were race bikes with headlights. They revved to 16,000 RPM and screamed like F1 cars. But in 2021, something tragic happened. The Yamaha R6, the king of the class, was discontinued as a road bike. Why? Euro 5. The Euro 5 emission standards are incredibly strict. To make a high-revving engine meet these standards, you have to choke it with massive catalytic converters and restrictive tuning. The engineering cost to make a 600cc engine pass these laws was so high that it would have made the bike too expensive to sell. Yamaha did the math and realized they couldn't make a profit. So, they killed the road-legal R6. You can still buy it as a track-only bike, but you cannot register it. You cannot put a license plate on it. The government didn't say you can't build this. They just set the bar so high that the engine couldn't jump over it. Sometimes, a technology is banned not because it fails, but because it works too well. Let's look at the pinnacle of racing, MotoGP. In recent years, Ducati introduced winglets, aerodynamic wings, on the front of the bike. The concept was simple. Wings on a plane create lift to make it fly. Invert the wings, and they create downforce, pushing the front tire into the ground. This stopped the bike from wheeling under acceleration, allowing riders to use full throttle earlier. It was an unfair advantage. The organizing body, the FIM, panicked. They claimed it was a safety issue, that these carbon fiber blades could slice another rider in a crash. But many insiders believe the real reason was cost. Ducati had started an aerodynamic war that the other factories couldn't afford to fight. The result: strict regulations on the size, shape, and integration of wings. While not a total ban, the unlimited aero era was outlawed before it could even really begin. It's a reminder that even in racing, you are only allowed to be faster if the rulebook says so. We have talked about the past. Now, we have to talk about the future. The biggest ban in history hasn't happened yet, but the law is already written. The United Kingdom, parts of the European Union, and states like California have passed legislation to ban the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles. The dates vary: 2030, 2035, 2040, but the destination is the same. This isn't just banning a specific unsafe model like the ATC or a dirty technology like the two-stroke. This is a ban on the explosion itself. The motorcycle, as we know it, a machine that breathes air, burns fuel, and vibrates with life, is facing its expiration date. The engines we love, from the rumble of a Harley V-twin to the scream of a Ducati V4, are living on borrowed time. We are living in the golden age of horsepower, but the sun is setting. Engineers and lawmakers will always be at war. One pushes the limits of physics. The other pushes the limits of safety and order. The bikes on this list were casualties of that war. Some deserved to die. Some were taken from us too soon. But one thing is certain: they were too radical for the world they lived in. If you own one of these survivors, keep it running, because they aren't just making them anymore. They aren't allowed to make them anymore. Thanks for watching. If you want to know about the engine that was so complex it bankrupted a company, click the video on the screen right now. You won't believe what they tried to build.